Good morning. Oh, out of frame for a second. Good morning, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. It's Friday. Happy Friday. Happy weekend. Where I am, it looks like it's going to be a nice weekend. Going to try to get outside today. On the good news, things I'm grateful for front. I've been on a bit of a health kick since the beginning of the year. I may look a little bit different if you've been watching these. Good morning. I might look a little bit different if you've been watching these. I'm down 33 pounds as of this morning. Isn't that's pretty crazy. I'm not a particularly vain person, but I'm 52 and my knees really thank me for it. And I'm not sure if this is true, but I heard that every pound of weight you lose takes 4 pounds of pressure off your knees. And I got to tell you that my knees are thanking me for taking care of my health. So, but I'm at the age where I have to, be concerned about things like type 2 diabetes and stuff like that. So it's a health thing and not just a vanity thing. I'm not a particularly vain person. If you watch these, I basically wear the same, I wear, I wear a black t-shirt every single day. I do like my glasses though. My red glasses, that's my fashion accessory. What are we talking about today? Today, we're talking about I'm going to use the terms conscious and unconscious minds. Some may use the word subconscious. I think that's an okay term. I come from a hypnotherapy background, and we here's a secret. Here's a hypnosis secret. Uh, if you hear a hypnotist or hypnotherapist talking about using the phrase "you're unconscious," that's what we call a syntactical ambiguity, right? Meaning you don't know if I'm saying "your" as in your possessive, like your unconscious mind, or if I'm saying "you are unconscious," right? And so the mind does this thing called transderivational search, where it's trying to figure things out, even if you're not aware of it, because it happens at the level of the unconscious, happens at the level of your unconscious, and um, and to make sense out of it, it needs to experience it a little bit. So it's a way of sort of getting you to have a trance experience up front. And I'll talk a little bit about that because this talk is about conscious and unconscious minds. And why do we care about that? Why do we care about our conscious and unconscious mind? And I will talk about that. And uh, what made me want to talk about this today is I was listening to a talk on the teachings of a man named Neville Goddard. If you're not familiar, Neville Goddard was has been described as a Christian mystic. He really, really, really is kind of one of the fathers of the what we consider today the law of attraction movement. And he taught a lot and he wrote a lot about manifesting and creating our reality and all of those things. And he did it from he did it from a decidedly Christian perspective, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, other than people who are not Christian can get a lot out of his writings. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but you just have to read it for what it is. He's talking about manifesting like you're doing the miracles that Christ did, right? So he has very Christian language. And if you're not Christian, that might put you off, but don't be put off by that. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Um, Everything Neville Goddard ever wrote is worth reading. Everything he ever said is worth reading, in my opinion. Not that I haven't read everything that Neville Goddard has written. I don't know that I could. He was prolific, but you can get through a lot of his stuff. You can find a lot of his stuff online. You can buy books that have, lots of his writings in them and that sort of thing. And so uh, anyway, I was listening to this talk about the teachings of Neville Goddard, and he was talking about the difference between the conscious and the unconscious mind. And I thought, yeah, I haven't myself have not gone through that in a long time. Like that's something that in my training in hypnotherapy, that's we do a lot of work about the difference between the conscious and the unconscious mind. And to me, it's fascinating, and it is also a part of who we are. It's a part, I don't I don't separate mind, body, and spirit, other than when I really need to get granular about talking about them. I think there's just a continuum there, right? Um, and so consciousness is a is my domain. It's the challenging subject. It's the thing I like to talk about. It's the thing I like to explore. Mainly a shamanic practitioner, so I'm using altered states and all kinds of things all the time. In TCM, knee pain is often due to an imbalance of the gallbladder. Oh, traditional Chinese medicine, TCM. Gotcha. Affecting the popliteus muscle at the back of the knee. Consider supplementing with taurine to see if it helps. Yeah, thank you. That's good advice. I will check that out. And oh, you are so welcome. Thank you for that. Um, I have in the past gotten acupuncture, and I want to get back to that. I'm a strong believer and am absolutely convinced in the efficacy in traditional Chinese medicine, particularly acupuncture, herbology. I mean, you got to figure, like, a culture that's been going for like 5,000 years has got to know a lot of stuff about healing and that kind of thing. So, good stuff. Thank you very much, Taurine. I will look into that for sure. But definitely taking pressure off my joints is a good thing for me. And I mean, people may or may not know this, but I'm an amputee. So I have a below knee amputation on my left leg. And so my bone structure is already naturally off. My legs are different lengths, and this can sometimes cause hip and knee issues. So taking pressure off of that is helpful as well. But thank you for that. I will definitely look into that. Gallbladder meridian. I will remember that. Um, so anyway, back to Neville Goddard. I highly recommend the works of Neville Goddard if you get a chance. You can read a lot of his stuff online, probably for free, since he was teaching, I think, at the beginning of the 20th century. A lot of his stuff may be in public domain. Don't quote me on that. I'm not 100% positive. It's not something I researched before this, but this person who was lecturing about the teachings of Neville. So Neville Goddard, in sort of new thought circles, in personal development circles, and some spiritual circles, like, his teachings were so influential. If you have been affected by the book or the movie The Secret, or any law of attraction stuff or whatever, you have absorbed some of the teachings of Neville, even if they were taught by other teachers. And but in those circles, Neville is like, his name is Neville Goddard, but he is so well known, and so well regarded, that most people just say Neville and know it's like Madonna or Cher, right? He's like a single name guy, Neville. And um, people have even used his name as a verb. I'm going to Nevilize that, or I'm going to practice Nevilism as I don't know if that's too many people use that, but I've heard of Nevilizing my goals. So he's talks a lot about that. And his basic premise is, you have a conscious mind, but you have a conscious mind, you have an unconscious mind. And I think everybody knows that. And I'm gonna demo that to you today. If you stick around, I'm gonna do a really quick demo of your conscious and unconscious mind for you, or with you, for that you can do experience at home. If you're playing along, this is something you can do safely at home or wherever you happen to be. Um, so um, you have a conscious and unconscious mind, and your conscious mind directs, and your unconscious mind uh, receives, and it receives everything, right? So I've read different figures on this, but there's something like through our sense organs alone, meaning like the nerves in our skin and our retinas and our olfactory and taste sensors and our proprioceptive things, like we're taking in millions of bits of information every second, millions, right? But we can't pay attention to millions of bits of information every second. You can't do that consciously, right? So, um, is that information just getting thrown away? And the answer to that is no, it's not getting thrown away. It's being processed by your what we call your unconscious, by which is a grandiose term for everything that's going on with you on the mental plane that you is not in your immediate awareness. And that's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of stuff. And so, one metaphor that I have heard used by other hypnotherapists is, um, imagine you're in like the largest warehouse in the world, but it was completely dark and just full of stuff. And that is your unconscious. You don't know what's in there. You don't know what's in your unconscious. It's unconscious. That's where the word comes from, right? But that's your conscious mind. It stores everything. Biggest warehouse. Imagine the biggest warehouse you've ever been in, but it's pitch dark. And you have a tiny little flashlight that you can shine around. That's your conscious mind. Or your conscious mind is whatever your tiny little flashlight shines upon. So at the moment, it might be sensory information coming in. It might be you're hearing perhaps my voice. If you're looking at the screen, you're seeing me. Sensory information is coming on. That's in your conscious mind. Um, but here's a quick demo of your conscious and unconscious mind. If I ask you right now, what color is your mailbox? Right? Most people will be able to, mine's white, and I'm not looking at it, right? But before I asked you that, it was, and it will pop into your consciousness. So you might have to picture it, you might have to think about it, whatever, that's fine. That's your conscious and unconscious working together with a flashlight in the warehouse to find the information. Um, so where was that? And you'll say, well, it's in my memory, right? But how was it retrieved? How was that memory retrieved? And we can talk about neurology and all that stuff, but just from a consciousness perspective, your unconscious mind responded to essentially a direction, right? Your conscious mind gave it a direction. Go find out what color my mailbox is. And a memory popped, and it went and it found it and it brought that into your consciousness. So then you become aware of it. There are other memories that are harder to retrieve. Where did I leave my keys? Right? If we weren't paying attention at the time, if we didn't make enough neural connections to that memory when we made that memory, or if the memory is farther in the past. Now, here's a really interesting thing about memory. A lot of people think that your memory is like a video recorder, right? I almost said video camera, right? Do people still use video cameras? Most people use their phones. I guess some people do. Um, Most people think it's like a camera where you are recording everything exactly as it happens. And that's not how memory works. And that's how like eyewitness testimony on stands is so different. And if the old Japanese story Rashomon, right, is like five people seeing the same thing, but each one of them having a different version of what happened, right? Your memory, every time you remember something and you recall it, it is being recreated. That process is happening unconsciously, but stuff has happened between the time you formed the memory and now, and that memory as it's being reconstructed might be connected to a bunch of other things. So your recall of things in sort of exacting detail, um, is not what you think it is, right? That's why I have been in been in conflict with somebody, right? Had a disagreement about something, and they're like, "Well, you did this, 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 and this, and this," and I'll say, what happens a lot of times when you're in conflict with somebody about facts, about details of something, they'll say, um, this and this happened." You say, "No, this and this happened," right? Um, but you should understand that most of the time, those people aren't lying. They are recalling differently than you are. They have a different viewpoint on that, and people's cognitive biases come into play. Um, for example, there's a good one that's called the fundamental attribution error. And what that means is when bad things happen to other people, often we attribute or to groups that we consider outside of our groups. So this is what where like a lot of prejudice comes in and a lot of like looking down on the poor. All of this comes in. The tendency, the bias is to blame that on the person, the character flaws. When bad things happen to us, we attribute, that's where the fundamental attribution at it's we're attributing bad things. Bad things happen to me because of circumstances I can't control. Bad things happen to other people because they're bad people, right? And I'm not saying it's as simple as that. It is very complex. Our prejudices, our biases, our upbringing, our education all comes into play there. The idea that we experience objective reality is false. We only experience reality from a subjective perspective. And that but it doesn't matter. It's not that important that we experience objective reality. We can have consensus about reality, but subjective reality is important. Um, we have there is a prejudice towards objective observation and that sort of thing, and I understand that, right? So we're not just making stuff up in our head that's going on, that sort of thing, but there are anything that humans get involved with, there's a huge amount of bias. And the idea, like people are, well, I'm not biased. I don't have cognitive biases. That's the biggest cognitive bias there is. We're blind. They're unconscious that those biases live in our conscious. We all have them. I include myself in that. I don't think I'm free from bias. If you think you're free from bias, you are deluding yourself. You cannot be. You would not exist in this world. You could not live in this world without biases. But our biases don't always serve us well. So that's, just a couple of examples. So we have this conscious unconscious split. And we feel like because we live in our consciousness is everything we're aware of. And Neville actually said our entire universe exists in our conscious mind, right? Talk about subjective reality. Okay. Everything we are experiencing, everything that is real to us, we are experiencing in our conscious mind. That isn't to say other things aren't real. I'm not saying that at all. Um, but we're not observing them at the moment. We're not looking at them until we call them up into our consciousness. We're not experiencing that. So our consciousness, the definition, I guess I should define consciousness. Consciousness is first person objective experience. That's it. That's the technical definition of consciousness, right? I am having a subjective experience. You are having a subjective experience right now. You are having that, I think, from a first person perspective. Although, that gets a little blurry sometimes too. In shamanic work, we often dissociate and can experience things from multiple perspectives, sometimes simultaneously. It gets very mind bendy in the world of shamanism, particularly when you get into stuff like shapeshifting, and which is a thing. It's a real thing, and or merging with animal spirits and stuff like that, where your perception is so changed, so altered, that you're still having a first person subjective experience. It's just not you anymore for a period of time. And you don't get stuck like that, and you're not being possessed. You're actually possessing. You're actually doing the possessing. Um, but it's a little bit of a, a little bit of a fine line there. So, um, conscious unconscious split. So there's research some time ago, the 7 ± 2, meaning we can hold in our short-term memory, our working memory, the memory we're using right now, about 7 to 9 bits of information. Sometimes less if we're tired or we're impaired or something like that. So if I read you a 7-digit number, you could remember it for a short period of time. But until you move that into long-term memory, you would not easily be able to consciously recall that. Although under hypnosis, sometimes we can improve recall of things like that. But let's talk about working memory, like what's in your mind right now? Like when I said, what color is your mailbox? The memory of the color of your mailbox came up, I assume. Maybe it didn't, but let's say it did. You're holding that in your memory right now, right? Is working memory. If I said, okay, think of the color of your mailbox and think of a chess move you might make, and think of like, eventually you're going to kind of like relegate some of the earlier stuff. You can't hold that much stuff in your brain at one time, in your consciousness. In your brain, yes, you can hold everything. Your brain and your body, and consciousness is non-local. We cannot localize consciousness to brain activity. Science has not been able to do that. Consciousness is not a byproduct of having a brain. Consciousness is a field in which experience arises. That's the metaphysical definition of consciousness. So, you can only hold a few pieces of information in your conscious mind. Your unconscious mind can hold everything all at once. That doesn't mean it's easily accessed, right? What did you have for lunch on your 8th birthday? I don't know. But it's probably there. It's probably there. My unconscious mind could probably reconstruct it. Here's a really great, this is an experience that's happened to everybody at some point. So this is a really great demonstration of how your unconscious mind works. So, you if you've ever had the experience of trying to recall somebody's name, maybe you run into somebody on the street that you haven't seen in 10 years or something. Oh, hey, how you doing? Great, nice to see you. Happens to me all the time. I'm bad with that. I'm bad with consciously recalling names of people I know from 30, 40 years ago. Um, I had a weird thing in my hometown too, where I look a lot like my dad did when he was my age. And so people who knew my dad a long time ago will recognize me. They're like, oh, you must be his son. I'm like, I don't even know you. But yeah, I look that close to my dad that, we could have been, absolutely could have been brothers. Um, so you've had that, or you try to recall a word, or you try to recall a story, and oh, the words on the tip of my tongue, right, is the saying we have in English. Um, it's not. It's in the back of your brain somewhere. So, and then like 2 days later or sometime later, the person's name pops in your head. Oh, that was Randy. Yeah. Oh my God, that was Randy. Yes, yes, yes. What happened? How did that name pop into your head? You weren't thinking about Randy. In fact, it's more likely that it's going to pop in your head when you're not consciously thinking about it, right? So, and here's a trick, and it's not really a trick. A lot of people know this. You may already do this. If I'm trying to recall something really hard, I'm like thinking really hard and I'm having trouble remembering some piece of information. I do my best to drop it and go do something else. Um, and when I do that, invariably that thing that I'm trying to remember will come back to me. Why? How does that happen? Think about it. Think about it from the warehouse perspective. I'm shining my flashlight around in the warehouse, looking for the box that holds the information with my friend's from 30 years ago name in it. How does how does that come up 3 days later? Well, there are processes. There are warehouse workers, and they are working behind the scenes. There are processes, there are unconscious processes that are going on. There's one unconscious process called transderivational search, which is a fun one if you're into comedy at all. Transderivational search means that um, if I say some words to you that have a really obvious meaning, but there could be a secondary meaning to it, like a joke. Like if I use a word joke, I was driving down the road and I see something strange and I say, "What's that in the road ahead?" Right? So the expression is, "What's that in the road ahead?" Ahead of me, but it could be, "There's a head lying in the road," right? I know, stupid joke, not even good enough to be a dad joke, but it it's a syntactic ambiguity. So you take the first meaning that makes a lot of sense to you into your conscious mind, but then your unconscious mind is still processing, it's searching for meaning. It's making other meanings back there that you're not even aware of. This is why sometimes somebody tells us a joke and we don't get it. And then a few hours later, a few days later, we go, "Oh, yes, there's that joke." Now, to me, it might it might seem like a failure, right? That I didn't get the joke up front, or I didn't remember my friend's name up front, or I didn't. But what an amazing thing! What an unbelievable thing our unconscious is, that it is continuing to work in the background even while we're unaware of it. That amazes me to think of how powerful our unconscious mind is. Beyond that, it is helping keep us alive, right? You don't have to think about your heart beating. You don't have to think about your food digesting. Most of the time, we don't think about our breathing. We can take conscious control of our breathing. You can hold your breath or breathe faster, breathe slower, but you still breathe even when you're asleep or even when you're not thinking about it. Your breath continues. As I'm talking to you, I'm not conscious, the words are coming out, but I'm not consciously thinking about what I'm saying to you. Like that would take too long. Okay, I need to put together a sentence that means this. First word, the. First, that would take 10 years for me to get a paragraph out where I can just talk. I just have an intention. My consciousness sets the intention. I'm talking about the conscious and unconscious minds. And the unconscious mind carries it out. So the conscious mind is a little bit like the captain of the ship, and the unconscious mind is like everything else on the ship, all the systems, all the crew, the lifeboats, all the stuff that's going on underneath it. And it really is absolutely amazing. I never cease to be amazed at the unconscious and the conscious. This pretty consciousness is pretty amazing in itself. We take it for granted because we live here. We live in our experience. It's like a fish swimming in the ocean that may not even be aware that there's water. We're living in it. We experience everything we experience is happening in our consciousness. But there's a lot of stuff that's being done for us in our unconscious mind. Now, in some systems of spirituality, you have an unconscious and you have a super conscious. The super conscious is mostly an unconscious process. But the super conscious is our connection to divinity, our connection to spirit, our connection to our own spirit. It's like the mind spirit connector. Um, I talked about Ho'oponopono the other day, and so if you want to find that, you can go, however you're watching me, you can go back and find the recording of that. But I talked about the Hawaiian model of the three selves, the lower self, which is the subconscious or unconscious, um, the middle self, and the higher self. And it's an interesting model, an interesting construct that is mirrored in other spiritual and psycho-spiritual systems. Um, so one of the interesting things about Neville that I think is also comes from many other spiritual systems, particularly Hermetics, is that he relates the conscious mind to the masculine and the unconscious mind to the feminine. Right. Now, I'm not talking about gender identity or, even biology at this point, but the spiritual principle of gender being in both things, and being in all things. So the Kybalion, which is a Hermetic text written in the early 20th century, um, one of the principles from the Kybalion says that everything has its masculine and feminine principle. The key word in that sentence to me is and. Everything has its masculine and feminine principle, right? Now, patriarchy and toxic masculinity and misunderstanding tells us that everything is either masculine or feminine. I'm a guy, I identify as a man, I have male biology. You'll have to take my word for that. So everything about me is male. But that's not what that's not what the ancients said. We have masculine, all of us, everything. This cup of coffee has masculine and feminine parts, aspects, principles, right? But we have to get beyond what we think of the cultural ideas of masculine and feminine, which are really out of whack. And we know that because cultural ideas of masculine and feminine change significantly over time, right? When my mother was a kid going to school, she was forced to wear a dress every day to school. That was the rule. Had to wear a dress every day to school, even in the winter. And she lived in Maine, and the winters are flipping cold here. Had to wear a dress, right? And all the girls were required at the beginning of school, and this is a public school. This is not a private or parochial school, to kneel at the front of the classroom to make sure the length of their dress went below their knees, or they were sent home. Um, you know, it wasn't until early in the 20th century that women in the United States could vote. It wasn't until the mid 20th century that women could open a bank account or get a credit card without their husband's permission. So the idea that gender roles have been the same and that sort of thing forever throughout time is completely 100% observably false. Absolutely 100% false. Even in my day, even in my, brief lifetime on this planet, things have changed significantly. So cultural gender stuff is cultural, and it differs from country to country, culture to culture, and it changes over time. That's how we know it is not a principle. Okay. Stuff that is a principle, a spiritual principle, principle of reality, however you want to look at it, doesn't change, right? So this principle that there is masculine and feminine in everything is true. So the conscious mind is seen by Neville as the masculine, the unconscious is seen as the feminine. So traditionally, even talking about in Taoism, you have yin and yang. The masculine aspect of anything is the initiator, and the feminine side um, is the part that um, you know sort of incubates. You can think of it like a mother's womb, right? So the unconscious is the womb out of which things are born. Um, the masculine is driving, evolving, active. The feminine side is receptive, right? So we have those aspects in everything. You can look at any part of you, any part of your life, and see that those things exist in some measure, in some degree. And you can't separate them, and they are both equally important, right? One is not higher or better than the other. There's no hierarchy here. There's no patriarchy. These things are critical. to your very existence, right? To your life on this planet. You have to have both of these things, right? So something like the you might know from school that you have a sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic activates its what is the thing that wakes us up, or our fight and flights stuff, whenever we need to initiate something or take care of a threat. That's our sympathetic nervous system. Our parasympathetic nervous system is responsible for resting, digesting, taking care of nurturing our body, that sort of thing. If those things are out of balance, the result is sickness. You cannot have one active all the time, um, or more active, or, way out of balance. You will get sick, right? So we have to have these things in balance. So we have to balance masculine and feminine principles. So our conscious and unconscious mind. So to Neville, the conscious mind directs, and the unconscious mind sort of, it's like the director or producer of a play, right? We decide what we want to happen on stage, and hopefully the set directors and the actors produce that, right? Our unconscious mind is working with us. So you will often get, I will say, you don't always get what you want, but you almost always get what you expect out of any situation, right? Sometimes we're surprised just because we don't control every circumstance. We can learn to control our own experience, our own interpretations, we can become less reactive, and we can and become more responsive, right? So the difference reactivity from a psychological perspective is when our emotions take over and we act without thinking, right? Where responsiveness is, okay, something happened to me. I'm feeling upset about this. Let me think about how I want to respond to this. In general, being responsive is more productive than being reactive, right? Um, Somebody yells at you, "You're a jerk," and you react by punching them in the nose. Well, that's not going to make your life better necessarily, right? Somebody yells, "You're a jerk," and you rock back and you think, "Why is that person calling me a jerk? Am I a jerk? I'm not a jerk, but why is this person calling? Oh, this person's upset. This person, sees me as the source of their problems, or whatever, whatever is going on." So, um, reactivity, and I understand reactivity. Oftentimes that can come from a place of wounding or a place of trauma. We have wounds there that, people talk about, triggers, right? We have triggers. Being triggered is when we have a reaction, and an overwhelming emotional reaction, and we kind of lose control, right? Um, if a trigger is strong enough and our wound is deep enough, and we haven't done our healing work, and it's not your fault if you have psychological wounding, but it's your responsibility to recognize that, oh, I'm being triggered by the same things over and over again. What can I do about that? How can I suss that out? How can I take care of myself better? How can I, not be so reactive? uh But if a wound is bad enough and a trigger is enough of a stimulus, it can cause, say, a dissociative episode, right? Or a panic attack, or, a complete the kind of the opposite of a panic attack, a complete shutdown. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So a very interesting thing is that our wounds are frequently held in our unconscious, right? Our psychological wounding is held in our unconscious. And our trick and so I was having a conversation with another shamanic teacher and a student of hers. We're just, chatting about things, and we're chatting about, triggers and wounding. So she said, this other teacher friend of mine said, what if instead of wounds we use the term teachers? I was like, oh, I like that. That's what we call a reframe, right? We're reframing that. I have these psychological wounds, but they're there for me to learn something. So they are in effect teachers. And then her student, really brilliant guy named Kevin. I'm giving him credit, but I told him I'm like, I'm going to steal this because I love it. He said, "Oh," he goes, "so triggers are breadcrumbs from the teacher." Right, light bulb went off over my head. Our triggers are breadcrumbs from our teacher, leading back to them. I'm talking this to, is it okay? If it is okay. Yes. Yeah, sure. I think I know what I think I know what I think I understand. I'm sorry, there's not really two-way. I mean, there's chat, which I do my best with chat while I'm doing stuff here. Um, so so when we get triggered, we don't always know the source of that, but it's a great opportunity. And I'm going to give you something here today. And this was a valuable lesson I got from one of my teachers, not my main teacher, but another teacher. I'm going to give you something. If you really want to do some work on yourself, if you really want to do some shadow work on yourself, um, keep a trigger journal for a month. And so, what's a trigger journal? So, every time you have, even if you don't act out on it, even if it's not overwhelming, oh, triggers as teacher. Yeah, use it. Yeah, absolutely. Use that. Take it. Take anything I say and use it. Use it any way you can, everywhere you can. So for a month or some length of time, my teacher made this was an assignment. I had to do this. Um, every time you feel a surprise emotional reaction to something, we'll call that a trigger. Something that's overwhelming or comes out of nowhere or whatever, write it down. Write down what happened. So I got cut off in traffic and I got so angry I laid on my horn for like 10 seconds and I really wanted to punch this guy in the nose. So write down what happened. So the event that triggered you. Or I saw a picture of my old friend on Facebook and it made me really angry. Or whatever, I got this happened and it made me really sad, or this happened. So you have an overwhelming reaction to something that is not necessarily proportionate or related to the stimulus, right? The stimulus is the trigger. um it is reminding you of something. It is pointing back. It's a breadcrumb back to this teacher. Write that down for a month. um I suggest at the end of that month going back and rereading all of that stuff and looking for patterns, looking for, oh my gosh, every time this happened, something, I got triggered this way, or every time something like this happened, um, I got triggered this way. I reacted this way. I became reactive. This is shadow work. This is stuff that will help you become a more integrated human being, right? Carl Jung said, "We don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light. We become enlightened by shining a light and making conscious the things in our shadow." And this is a first part of that. I guarantee that just by writing this stuff down, even beyond the review, oh, moon phases. Yeah, 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 absolutely. You can look at how moon phases affect that. You can look at all kinds of things. You can think of it as like if you had food allergies and you're trying to figure out what they were, you would keep a food journal over a period of time and see what you're reacting to physically. This is like that, but emotionally and psychologically. Right. And if you want, yeah, you could keep, phases of the moon along with that as well and see how that changes things. Um, for sure. But even just journaling, so writing and write it down by hand. I know pen and paper, don't type it into your computer. Why? Well, I suspected this, but there is very recent research that shows that writing things down activates much more of your brain than typing things out. So, handwriting activates much larger areas of your brain. Many more neural connections get made when you handwrite things than when you type them. So, this is what's meant in psychological circles as processing. You are doing more processing when you are journaling by hand than you are if you are typing things out or typing them out with your thumbs on your phone. So do yourselves a favor, get a paper journal. Doesn't have to be fancy. Could be this, right? This is about, I don't know, this is about $2 right here. Or you can go to a dollar store, right? 99 cents. You could pick up a journal, probably half the size of that, but it'll work. It doesn't matter. So write down the date, write down what happened, what was the stimulus, and what was your reaction to it. If you do that for any length of time, I think a month is good. But you'll start having insights before a month is up if you get triggered a lot. Don't go looking for triggers, but if you get triggered a lot, you'll have insights much quicker than a month because you'll find the same stuff happening over and over again. So for me, so when I was going through the very beginning of coming to terms with my trauma, anything involving my family of birth, so even like going to go see my brother and niece and nephew and stuff, um, I could have a panic attack from that. I'm like, what's going on with that? And it was just that this was a reminder of that trauma of times that were extremely traumatic. It was like making that connection back, right? So the other thing is, don't beat yourself up over getting triggered. Do not beat yourself up over getting triggered. A few years back, I used to have this monthly meetup group. It was called the Spiritual Professionals Network, and it was open to anybody who identified as spiritual, and it didn't matter what your background was, or even if you were just curious. It was open, but it was a place for people to come, just kind of talk about being spiritual beings. And I had people who were like worked in an accounting office, and she's like, I can't talk about this stuff with anybody. I have nobody to talk. So, and people are like, this is me coming out of the closet as spiritual, which I thought was interesting. But I had two young women show up one night to one of our meetups, and we would go around the circle, and introduce, and everybody introduce themselves. My name is John, this is what I do. And then we'd usually name something we're grateful for, or something like that. There'd be something each time we met. And so one of these young women that came, two young women that came together, um, probably early 20s, and she said, so my name is this, and I am in recovery from drug addiction. I'm in active recovery. I'm in a residential treatment. She was apparently allowed to leave, whatever that was. It wasn't one of those rehabs where you get locked down. She goes, but and part of my treatment includes like yoga and meditation and stuff. And so I thought I was getting a grip on my stuff and whatever. And then on the drive over here, somebody cut me off in traffic. And I got really upset about that. I got really upset that this person cut me off in traffic. I got really angry, and I flipped him off and honked my horn and whatever. And she goes, and then I'm like, getting angry at myself for getting angry. And I kind of, I tried to make a little light of it, which sometimes can break up some tension. I said, well, then did you get angry that you were angry that you were angry? And then did you get angry about that? And she kind of got it right. Don't beat yourself up for your triggers. Don't beat yourself up for your wounds. They're not, first of all, you didn't get them. It sounds weird, but almost celebrate getting triggered. Oh my gosh, thank you. At least be grateful for it. Be grateful for your teacher, your wounding, telling you where there's a spot in you that will be worked on, right? If you had, if you came out of the bathroom with toilet paper trailing off the bottom of your shoe, and I came over to you and quietly said, hey, look, there's toilet paper on the bottom of your shoe, you might be a little embarrassed, but you would be grateful that you didn't walk around the rest of the day with that, right? That somebody pointed that out to you. That's what's going on here. But that somebody is you. You are pointing out to you that you have stuff in your unconscious that needs to be healed and worked on. So it's common here. Sorry, it's taking me so long. I find triggers are teachers saying very empowering. Yes. It turns a helpless feeling into something you can use to strengthen yourself. Yes, absolutely, 100%. That is exactly what I'm saying, right? It is a reframe to think about it in a different way. How is this a tool? How is this helping me? Use it to help you. That's what it's there for. It's not there to make your life miserable, right? Our emotions are there to point something out, right? Our emotions are signals, they're smoke signals. That doesn't mean we have to cling to them. We don't want to do that. We don't want to get attached to our emotions. We want to observe them and allow them to crest and fall, right? So, like grief, if you hold on to grief for the rest of your life, you don't move on, you don't grow, you don't move through it. But there's nothing wrong with feeling grief. It's uncomfortable. It hurts. Yeah, it's baggage you can unpack to lessen your burden that you carry. Lessen and lessen. Yes, that's what we call a syntactical ambiguity. You can get a lesson from your burden and let while you're lessening your burden. Um, yeah, very good, very good. Um, so you know, so often we're very hard on ourselves. We can be our harshest critics. Give yourself some grace. Give yourself some love. Right. I'm going through this. I'm human. As a spiritual teacher, there is frequently not frequently. I think, hopefully, I mean, I'll never say I've completely overcome anything, but there's a temptation to come off as holier than thou, as better than, as, I'm a level 32 wizard, it's Dungeons and Dragons or something, right? I'm not that. I'm a human being, right? And I hope that that comes across when I teach. I've got my lessons to learn. I've got my work to do. I'm not here to start a cult. I'm not here for guru stuff. I'm just here to pass on stuff that I have learned. That's it. That's absolutely it. I have not learned to levitate yet. I'm working on that. I'm losing weight. I've lost 33 pounds this year so far. So far. I got a little ways to go. Until I'm gonna get on sort of maintenance. But maybe I'll levitate. How much more weight do I have to lose before I can levitate? Um, that that's funny. Uh, I can't levitate or walk through walls yet, or turn invisible. Although there are some secrets. Maybe I'll do one on invisibility sometime. That'll be a fun one. We'll talk about invisibility as a reality, not just as a superhero kind of thing. There's a lot to a little bit of a tangent, but going off on oh, thank you very much, I appreciate it. I feel like I feel better, I feel like I look better um than I did, so thank you. The I'll talk about invisibility sometime. That'll be fun. We'll do one on invisibility. I cannot teach you how to go invisible, but I will teach you a little bit about how it actually works. Um, and it's not like you think in the movies where you turn transparent and whatever, but there are ways that are psycho spiritual ways to be less noticed, to go less noticed in the world. And that can be very useful. Think about people who were persecuted as witches or that sort of thing back in the day, being able to move unseen or amongst a crowd and not be noticed, or that sort of thing. And uh, I learned like this much, a little bit about tracking animals from if you know him, Tom Brown. I took a course from Tom Brown in tracking and wilderness survival, and this guy uh, consulted with SEAL Team 6 and the FBI and whatever on tracking human beings. But also, he's a hunter and tracked animals, and he learned from a grandfather figure who I want to say was Apache, was an Apache scout, one of the last um, Apache scouts, and so knew everything about tracking and could like walk across. He goes, "Oh, at 5 a.m. this morning, a raccoon came across here, put his feet up, looked to the left, looked to the right." Like he can read tracks like that, and it's pretty amazing. But I learned a little bit about not being seen by animals, and so off on a tangent. I will one day I will talk about invisibility. I think it'll be fun. It'll be a fun thing. If you could have any superpower, what would it be? And that tells me a little bit about people's personality, right? So my answer is always invisibility. Why? Because I'm mischievous. Because I would use it for practical jokes all the time, like moving stuff around that people can't see, or whatever. Um, I think my one of my shamanic teachers asked me that, like, if you have any superpowers, like, oh, invisibility. And she's like, "Yep, that makes sense. That makes sense." Some people would say flying, or, oh, be able to talk with animals. I know people who do that. I have a very good friend that wrote a book on animal whispering. Um, yeah, like to know what they say. Yeah, it's not a skill of mine, but it is something that some shamanic practitioners do, that they specialize in. I dated somebody for a while who's an animal whisperer, and it was remarkable. We went to a wolf rescue, and wolves are not domesticated dogs. They are not the same beings. They are very different. They look the same. They're from the same sort of family tree of animals, but wolves are not domestic dogs. They are much larger and have much different, very, very different social behavior and stuff. So anyway, this um, woman I was dating, who is an animal whisperer, like went up, and they tell you, like, the wolves are in these enclosures. They have big amount of space they can live in, and they don't stick your fingers through the cage. You can put your hand up, don't stick your fingers through, because they could take a finger off, just like that. Um, so she went up to the wolf enclosure and, like, kind of knelt down, and one of the female wolves came up and started licking her forehead through the through the cage, like, immediately. Like, there's no time lapse. And the person who worked there, who had to work there for a very long time to be accepted by the wolf, she's like, "I've only seen that with one other person, and that person was a Native American shaman." So, yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Yeah, it was a pretty amazing experience, actually, the whole thing, the whole meeting the wolves thing. There was a male wolf there. I get along really, really well with animals. I do well with animals, but there was a male wolf, a really, really flipping large male wolf, who did not like me. He stood back and, like, was like snarling and I was like, "Come in peace, my friend." But the other wolves were fine. The other wolves were fine with me. There's just this one. I don't know if he didn't like. I was the only man there at the time. There were only a few people there, and I got to tell you, through a fence, even through a fence, that's no joke. Face to face with a wolf who's snarling at you and barking, I'm like, "Oh my gosh." Yeah, I would not want to, run into a hungry wolf in the wild. And wolves generally don't bother human beings. But, you know, are they taller than dogs? I've never seen one. Yeah, I mean, it depends on the breed of the dog, right? Like, I've had, uh, Great Danes come up to me that were, like, up to, like, here on me. Great Danes love me. Like, anytime anybody has a Great Dane, they immediately come over. But I remember I was hiking and this guy had a Great Dane, and I went over to see if I could I think it was pat her, and she, like, comes up to me and starts rubbing on me. He goes, "Oh," he goes, "be careful, she'll knock you over." And she, like, leaned into me and did almost knock me over. But uh yeah, they're bigger than most domestic dogs, much bigger than most domestic dogs. Um, oh, never seen a wolf in real life. If you get a chance, it's an amazing experience. It was something I can't really put into words. Uh, but just yeah, just amazing. Uh, Very cool experience. And so the whole thing about alpha males and all that stuff has been debunked, by the way. The leader of this group of wolves is actually a female, one of the females, and it was really interesting because the woman who worked there, that was showing us around, it's like, I'll see if I can get them howling, right? And so she went into the enclosure where a bunch of the wolves were, including the female, and she's like, she's the boss. So she goes into the enclosure with them, and she's been around them for years, and they get to know her, and she feeds them and stuff. She goes into the enclosure and she has to sit and like not make eye contact with them. And she howls, the keeper howls, right? And all the wolves are kind of looking at her, and the female wolf howls, and then they all howl, but not before. And then so then the keeper stops, and the wolves are howling for a little while. As soon as the female who is in charge stops, all of them stop. Not one of them howled after her. She stops, they stop. She's in charge. It's not an alpha male. Which is also a thing that has been debunked by the person who originally wrote the study. Wolves have a very intricate social system that is really important to their survival. But that whole thing that has been adopted by really toxic men has been debunked. And human society doesn't have we don't have alpha males. We have guys who want to be alpha males. We have guys who want to have power over other people, but um, that's about it. So, um, I realized I went off on quite a lot of tangents here today, but that's okay. That's okay. That's fine. I like I like it when that happens. So anyway, it's Friday. I hope everybody has a very, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I think you're awesome too. Um, it's Friday. I hope everybody, unless you're watching this on recording and it's another day, but right now it's Friday. I hope everybody has an awesome weekend. I have to wrap up for the day. Got to pay the bills. Um, I know this is backwards. Sorry. Stay golden. Um, Someday I'll figure out how to reverse that so it's frontwards. I don't know. Um, uh, yeah, have a lovely day, lovely weekend. You're very welcome. I appreciate all of you for joining. If people didn't join, it wouldn't be worth my while to come in here and chat with you all. And I always get stuff from everybody. Um, I learn things from you as well, so that's really great. I will surely do more of these. Thank you very much. Thank you for the rose. Thank you for all the likes today. Um, yes, you have a great weekend as well. Um, and take care. Be well. My love to you all. Just gonna end here.